You might think the first humans to board a generation ship would be the ultimate cosmic pioneers, but astrophysics reveals a brutal weight paradox. The terrifying truth: after 3 centuries buried in the dark, they would be blown past by faster, future ships landing only to become living relics in a booming civilization already built by the very descendants they left behind. If you want to decode this cruel paradox and the darkest realities of deep space survival, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Brace yourself. Let's begin. You've seen the map, the solar system laid out in a neat horizontal line, Sun on the left, Neptune on the right, everything color-coded and to scale. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, then the gas giants, fat and ringed and majestic, and Neptune, lonely at the edge, looking maybe 2 feet away from the sun if you stood close enough to the poster. It looked manageable. It looked like a neighborhood. That map lied to you. Not maliciously. It just couldn't tell the whole truth. Because the moment you step outside that neighborhood, the moment you ask what lies beyond Neptune, beyond the Oort cloud, beyond the outermost whisper of the sun's gravitational reach, the scale of what you're looking at becomes something the human brain was genuinely never built to process. Let's start with the most well-traveled object ever built by human hands. Voyager 1, launched September 5th, 1977, now the most distant human-made object in existence. As of today, it has traveled approximately 24 billion kilometers from Earth. 24 billion. That number should make you feel something enormous. Something like pride, nearly 5 decades of sailing through absolute darkness. One tiny machine carrying a golden record and our best guess at who we are. And yet, that 24 billion kilometers represents just 1/1700th of the distance to Proxima Centauri, the closest star to our sun. Sit with that for a moment. Voyager 1, our greatest traveler, our farthest flung ambassador, has barely left the driveway. If you need a physical comparison to make that ratio feel real, take a standard 12-inch ruler, the kind sitting in a desk drawer somewhere in your house right now. If that ruler represents the full distance from Earth to Proxima Centauri, then everything Voyager 1 has ever traveled 46 years of continuous flight. 24 billion kilometers measures less than the width of a single human hair at the ruler's edge. Every mission NASA has ever flown, every planet humanity has ever visited, all of it crammed into a sliver too thin to see. That is the invisible wall. Not a wall made of anything, just distance pure, indifferent, incomprehensible distance. So here is the question that should stop you cold if Voyager 1 needed 46 years just to cross the outer threshold of our own solar system. What on earth or off it could ever carry human beings across 4.24 light years in a single lifetime? The honest answer is nothing we currently have, but let's be specific, because vague hopelessness isn't useful. A conventional chemical rocket, something in the class of the Falcon Heavy, the most capable operational launch vehicle today, would take approximately 76,000 years to reach Proxima Centauri. That is longer than modern Homo sapiens have existed as a species. You would depart before the last ice age ended and arrive long after every civilization that has ever existed is dust on a planet no one remembers. Ion propulsion, the elegant, efficient drive used by NASA's Dawn spacecraft, cuts that down to roughly 18,000 years. Better? Still an eternity that swallows all of recorded human history 7 times over. What about Breakthrough Starshot? The initiative backed by the late Stephen Hawking and funded with $100 million, designed to accelerate a tiny laser sail to 20% of the speed of light. In theory, it reaches Proxima in about 20 years. 20 years is extraordinary. 20 years is revolutionary. 20 years also only works if your spacecraft is the size of a postage stamp and carries nothing but a microchip. The moment you try to put a human being on it with food, water, air, medical equipment, and the psychological need to not die screaming in a tin box, the mass increases by a factor that makes the laser sail approach physically incoherent. You'd need a laser array the size of a small country pointed at it for years. The physics don't bend for cargo. The conclusion is uncomfortable but unambiguous. No technology currently in operation, or within realistic engineering reach in the next several decades, can deliver living human beings to another star system in under 1,000 years. 1,000 years. That is the minimum realistic horizon. This is where engineers stop trying to go faster and start thinking differently entirely. The reason just build a faster rocket doesn't work comes down to a piece of physics first described by Konstantin Tsiolkovsky in 1903. The Tsiolkovsky rocket equation is brutal in its simplicity. To double your final velocity, you don't double your fuel. You need to square it. The relationship between fuel mass and speed gain is exponential in the wrong direction. Every increment of additional speed demands a disproportionately massive increase in propellant. Think of it this way. Imagine a long-haul truck driver who decides to go faster by loading more gas cans in the back. Reasonable idea, except each gas can weighs something, which means the truck is now heavier, which means it burns more fuel to reach speed, which means you need more gas cans to compensate, which makes the truck heavier still. There is a ceiling. You hit it long before you approach anything like interstellar velocity using chemical combustion. The physics of the rocket equation aren't a funding problem or an engineering problem. They are a wall. So if you cannot go fast enough for any single human to survive the journey, what do? You change the question. Instead of asking how to get a person to another star, you ask how to get humanity there, not the individuals who board the ship, their children, their grandchildren, the generations born in transit who live their entire lives in the vessel, who die without ever seeing a planetary surface, and whose descendants, somewhere around generation 8 or 10 or 15, finally decelerate into orbit around a distant sun. That is the generation ship, not a spacecraft in the traditional sense, a civilization in a hull, a world that moves. The passengers who board do not arrive. They simply begin something. They commit their bloodline to a mission that will outlast every one of them by centuries, trusting, hoping that what they build will hold together long enough for someone who shares their DNA to step out the other side. It is, depending on your temperament, either the most inspiring act of sacrifice in human history or the most audacious imposition one generation has ever placed upon every generation that follows. Probably both, essentially. You're signing up for a vacation you will never return from, never see the end of, and never receive a review for, but your great-great-great-grandchildren might send a postcard back, if they still remember the address. But before you worry about the postcard, what exactly is powering that ship through 300 years of absolute darkness, with no gas station, no repair crew, and no second chances? Picture a nuclear power plant. Not the abstract, vaguely ominous symbol on a warning label, the real thing. Cooling towers the height of a 40-story building exhaling white steam into a gray sky? Concrete containment structures thick enough to stop a commercial aircraft. Hundreds of engineers working rotating shifts around the clock, each responsible for a specific system, a specific set of gauges, a specific checklist, thousands of replacement parts warehoused on site, an entire river running alongside, providing an effectively infinite supply of cooling water. And if something goes wrong, if anything at all goes wrong, the whole reactor can be shut down in seconds. The staff can walk out, and a support network of national infrastructure can mobilize within hours. That is how humanity currently operates nuclear fission, with extraordinary care, redundant systems, constant human oversight, and the permanent option to simply stop. The best-run reactors on the planet, the fleet operated by EDF in France, Widely considered the gold standard of nuclear operations, run continuously for approximately 18 months before requiring a major maintenance shutdown. 18 months of uninterrupted operation, then a scheduled stop, then fresh components, then back online. A rhythm of effort and rest. Effort and rest. That rhythm is part of what keeps them safe. Now consider what a generation ship actually needs. 300 years. Continuous. No maintenance windows. No external support. No option to stop. Every system aboard that ship depends on power. The artificial lighting that substitutes for sunlight without it, the crops die, and the oxygen supply begins to collapse within weeks. The heating systems that keep the interior temperature from dropping toward absolute zero without them. The ship becomes a frozen tomb in roughly the same time frame. The propulsion system, the medical equipment, the water recycling infrastructure, the computers that manage atmospheric composition, navigation, population health monitoring, and 10,000 other variables simultaneously. All of it, every single second of every single day for 3 centuries, requires a continuous and reliable energy source. Minimum viable power for a crew of 40,000 people works out to roughly the equivalent of powering a city the size of Cincinnati. Ohio, fully self-sufficient, drawing nothing from any external grid for 300 years straight. Not 300 years with occasional resupply. 300 years with the reactor room door welded shut from the outside after departure. No spare parts warehouse, no river for cooling, no option to call in the morning shift. Given those constraints, nuclear fission is not one option among several. It is the only option that current physics and engineering make even theoretically plausible. The numbers behind uranium-235 and plutonium-239 are almost offensive in how extreme they are. Nuclear fission fuel carries an energy density approximately 2 million times greater than coal. 1 kilogram of uranium-235, fully fissioned, releases the same energy as 2 million kilograms of coal burned completely. To make that tangible, a single uranium fuel pellet cylindrical, roughly the diameter of a thumb, about an inch tall, contains enough energy to supply electricity to an average American household for 3 years. 1 pellet, 3 years. The coal equivalent of that same 3 years would fill an entire room floor to ceiling. That density is the only reason an interstellar reactor is conceivable at all. You cannot carry enough chemical fuel or solar capacity to power a city for 3 centuries through deep space. But fission fuel is compact enough, energy-rich enough, that the mass budget becomes at least theoretically manageable. NASA has already moved in this direction. The Kilopower project formally tested under the name KRUSTY, Kilopower Reactor, using Stirling technology, ran a successful full-power test in 2018 at the Nevada National Security Site. It was designed specifically for long-duration space operations, producing between 1 and 10 kilowatts using a uranium-235 core the size of a paper towel roll. Small scale, but the proof of concept exists. The engineering path is real. Fusion would be better. Everyone knows it. Fusion produces more energy per reaction, generates less long-lived radioactive waste, and runs on hydrogen isotopes that are far more abundant than enriched uranium. There is a reason physicists have spent decades dreaming about it. The problem is the timeline. ITER, the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, being constructed in southern France, has been under development since 1985. As of now, it has not yet achieved stable net energy gain, a sustained reaction that produces more power than it consumes. Fusion has been described as 20 years away for roughly 40 consecutive years. That is not a knock on the scientists involved. The physics is genuinely difficult. Plasma containment at 150 million degrees Celsius is not a casual engineering challenge, but it means fusion remains a promise, not a technology. You cannot build a generation ship around a promise. Antimatter is even more extreme. Theoretically, matter-antimatter annihilation is the most energy-dense reaction physically possible, 100% mass-to-energy conversion, compared to roughly 0.1% for fission. The numbers are intoxicating. The reality is not. CERN, the most sophisticated particle physics facility on the planet, has produced approximately 17 nanograms of antihydrogen over 15 years of dedicated effort. 17 nanograms. That quantity, annihilated completely, would release enough energy to heat a cup of coffee by a few thousandths of a degree. The infrastructure required to produce antimatter fuel in any meaningful quantity does not exist and has no credible roadmap toward existence. Fission, it is imperfect, complicated, radiologically demanding, but real. Except there is a problem that the energy density numbers don't solve. And it is the problem that should keep mission planners awake at 3 in the morning. The reactor will break, not might, will. Somewhere between year 100 and year 200, something in that system will fail in a way that was not anticipated in the original design. A seal? A sensor? A cooling loop component experiencing metal fatigue after a century of thermal cycling. These are not hypothetical failure modes. They are statistical certainties across a long enough operational timeline. And when that happens, the question is not whether the ship has the manual. It almost certainly will. The question is whether anyone aboard, in generation 5 or 6 or 7, has ever actually repaired a fission reactor, not read about repairing one, not watched a simulation of one being repaired, actually done it with their hands in real conditions, under pressure, supervised by someone who had done it before. Nuclear engineering expertise is not the kind of knowledge that transfers cleanly through text. It is tacit, embedded in the fingertips, in the learned instinct that says something sounds wrong before any gauge confirms it, in the 10,000 small decisions that experienced operators make without consciously thinking about them. That knowledge lives in people, not in databases. And people die. You're already thinking it, just let artificial intelligence manage the reactor instead. Hand the whole system to an autonomous AI. Remove the human dependency entirely. It's a reasonable thought. There's just one small problem: what hardware is that AI running on when the replacement components run out after generation 3. The reactor solves the power problem, but humans don't run on electricity, and what they need next is more complex than any machine ever built. The International Space Station has kept human beings alive in orbit for over 2 decades. That alone is a staggering engineering achievement. The system responsible for breathable air aboard the ISS is called ECLSS, the Environmental Control and Life Support System, and it works through a combination of mechanical processes. Electrolysis splits stored water into hydrogen and oxygen. Carbon dioxide scrubbers pull exhaled CO2 out of the cabin air using chemical filters and catalytic converters. And a network of sensors constantly monitors atmospheric composition to keep everything within survivable parameters. For 7 people, on 6-month rotations, with resupply missions arriving every few months carrying fresh filters, replacement chemicals, spare components, and thousands of liters of water from Earth. The system is genuinely brilliant. It is also, for the purposes of a generation ship, completely useless as a long-term model. The ISS consumes approximately 3,000 liters of water per year that must be physically launched from Earth's surface. Every filter has a rated lifespan measured in months, not decades. The chemical compounds used to absorb carbon dioxide, lithium hydroxide, zeolite molecular sieves deplete with use and require replacement. The catalytic oxidizer that converts trace contaminants has components that degrade. Every single mechanical element in that life support chain was designed with a scheduled replacement interval. because the engineers who built it knew resupply was always coming. A generation ship has no resupply. Not in year 10, not in year 50, not ever. If the last functional CO2 scrubbing filter fails in year 80, 40,000 people begin losing consciousness within 6 hours, not gradually over weeks. Within hours, carbon dioxide poisoning doesn't give you time to improvise. At 4% atmospheric CO2, a level reached quickly in an enclosed space with 40,000 breathing bodies and no functional scrubbing headaches become incapacitation. Incapacitation becomes unconsciousness, and the cascade from there is irreversible. So ask yourself honestly, are you willing to stake the survival of an entire civilization across 3 centuries of deep space travel on a mechanical filter? The answer that serious researchers have converged on is not a better filter. It is abandoning the filter concept entirely and replacing it with something far older, far more resilient, and far less controllable, a living ecosystem. A bioregenerative life support system, BLSS, doesn't scrub carbon dioxide with chemistry. It uses photosynthesis. Plants absorb CO2, fix the carbon into sugars and cellulose, and release oxygen as a byproduct. They have been doing this for approximately 3 billion years without requiring a maintenance schedule or spare parts. That is the kind of reliability timeline an interstellar mission actually needs. The European Space Agency has been working on exactly this problem since the early 1990s through the EMILISA project, Microecological Life Support System Alternative. More than 30 years of research into closed-loop biological systems, studying how to engineer a self-sustaining ecosystem compact enough for a spacecraft. The findings are instructive and occasionally humbling. The basic math for a generation ship looks like this: supporting one person with sufficient oxygen and food through hydroponic plant cultivation requires approximately 50 square meters of growing area. Scale that to 40,000 people, and you need 2 square kilometers of continuous growing space, equivalent to 280 NFL football fields arranged side by side. That is not a greenhouse attached to a spacecraft. That is a spacecraft built around a greenhouse. And plants alone are not sufficient. Microbial decomposers, bacteria, and fungi break down organic waste into the raw nutrients that feed the plants. Without them, the waste cycle stalls. Nutrients accumulate in the wrong forms, and the growing system collapses. Pollinating insects, bees, flies. Specific species selected for enclosed environment viability are required to maintain crop reproduction across generations. Without pollinators, seed production fails, crop diversity narrows, and within several growing cycles, the agricultural base begins its own slow collapse. Then there is the layer most people don't think about until it is too late: gut microbiome. The human immune system is not a standalone machine. It is a co-evolved partnership between human biology and approximately 38 trillion microbial organisms living inside each person's body. Many of those microbial species are environmentally acquired from soil contact, from diverse food sources, from exposure to the microbial communities of other humans and animals. In a sealed, isolated environment with a shrinking diversity of biological inputs over multiple generations, the microbial ecosystem inside human bodies begins to simplify. The downstream effects: increased disease susceptibility, autoimmune dysfunction, metabolic disruption, are not predictable with precision, but the direction is not good. A generation ship doesn't just need plants. It needs soil microbes, decomposers, pollinators, gut bacteria, and the entire invisible web connecting them, not as a supplement to the mechanical life support, as the primary system. In 1991, a group of 8 researchers sealed themselves inside Biosphere 2, a glass and steel enclosed ecological structure built in Oracle, Arizona. covering 1.27 hectares of carefully designed biomes: rainforest, savanna, desert, ocean, agricultural zones. The project was the most serious real-world attempt ever made to create a self-sustaining closed ecological system for human habitation. The team planned to remain sealed inside for 2 years, living entirely off what the ecosystem produced. By the end of the first year, oxygen levels inside had dropped to 14.2%. Normal atmospheric oxygen is roughly 21%. 14.2% is the equivalent of standing at an altitude of approximately 4,000 meters high enough to cause altitude sickness, cognitive impairment, fatigue, and labored breathing in most people. The team could barely function. The culprit was not equipment failure. It was soil. Specifically, aerobic bacteria in the rich agricultural soil were consuming oxygen through decomposition at rates the designers had significantly underestimated. The plants were producing oxygen, but not fast enough to compensate for what the soil microbes were consuming. An invisible biological process, too small to observe directly, had quietly broken the atmospheric math. The oxygen problem was eventually addressed by pumping additional oxygen into the structure, which rather definitively ended any claim that Biosphere 2 was truly closed loop. On a generation ship 150 light-years from Earth, that fix is not available. The lesson from Biosphere 2 is not that closed ecological systems are impossible. It is that they are not engineering problems. They are biological problems. A living ecosystem is not a machine with predictable outputs. It is a dynamic, adaptive, sometimes willfully chaotic system of organisms, each pursuing their own survival, whose collective behavior at scale cannot be fully modeled in advance, no matter how sophisticated the simulation. Turns out creating a miniature planet inside a metal box was slightly harder than the engineers of 1991 anticipated. Just slightly. Say you solve the air problem and the water problem. There is still one issue that no plant, no machine, and no algorithm can resolve for you, and it sits inside the DNA of every single one of those 40,000 passengers. Food in America is frictionless. A farm somewhere in the Central Valley grows wheat. Trucks move it to a mill. More trucks carry it to a distribution center. A store stocks the shelves. You drive over, put it in your cart, take it home, and if it goes bad before you eat it, you throw it away. No drama, no consequence. The supply chain simply absorbs the waste and produces more. The average American discards somewhere between 30 and 40% of the food they purchase. That is not a moral judgment, just a structural fact about a system with so much redundancy and such reliable throughput that waste carries no real cost. The next delivery is always coming. The shelf will be restocked by morning. That psychology, that deep, unexamined assumption that more is always available, is one of the most dangerous cognitive defaults a generation ship crew could carry aboard with them. On a generation ship, nothing is wasted, not because of a policy, not because of a cultural value, though culture will matter enormously, because the physics and biology of the closed system make waste mathematically equivalent to slow death. Every calorie that goes unrecovered is a calorie that cannot feed the next generation. Every gram of protein discarded is a gram of nitrogen removed from the biological cycle. And phosphorus, the element essential to every molecule of DNA, every cell membrane, every bone in every body aboard, cannot be synthesized from atmospheric gases. It cannot be manufactured from raw elements with any technology a generation ship could carry. Every atom of phosphorus that exists on that ship at launch is every atom that will ever exist on that ship. It must circulate continuously, without loss. Every atom of nitrogen in your body right now, in the proteins of your muscles, and the enzymes in your cells must eventually return to the soil. On a generation ship, that cycle cannot be broken, delayed, or interrupted? If it is, 40,000 people need to eat next week with no replacement coming. The nitrogen cycle aboard a generation ship works like this. Proteins in food are digested by humans and excreted as urea and ammonia. Microbial decomposers convert those compounds into ammonium. Then nitrifying bacteria oxidize ammonium into nitrites and then nitrates. The form plants can absorb through their roots. The plants incorporate those nitrates into new proteins, which become food again. The loop closes. Every living thing aboard is, quite literally, eating a version of what came before. Phosphorus moves through a parallel loop. Bones, teeth, cellular structures, and DNA all contain phosphorus. When organisms die and decompose, that phosphorus must be captured from the biological material and reintroduced to the growing medium. No step in that recovery chain can be skipped. A phosphorus leak, even a small one, even one measured in grams per year, compounds across generations into a deficiency that eventually cannot be corrected. The practical menu for a generation ship is constrained not by culinary preference, but by caloric efficiency per square meter of growing space. Wheat, soybeans, and potatoes are the foundation, dense in calories, well suited to hydroponic cultivation, nutritionally complementary when combined. For protein, the most efficient source available is insects, specifically Gryllus bimaculatus. The common cricket converts 2 kilograms of feed into 1 kilogram of edible protein. By comparison, producing 1 kilogram of beef protein requires approximately 8 kilograms of feed, plus land, water, and methane outputs that a closed system cannot afford. Crickets also reproduce quickly, require minimal space, and can be raised on food scraps from the human population, a closed loop within the closed loop. Small fish, tilapia, and catfish primarily fit into aquaponic systems alongside hydroponic plant beds, where fish waste fertilizes the plants and the plants filter the water for the fish. Eggs and dairy from small livestock remain on the table. But every cow aboard occupies the food and space equivalent of 20 humans. The arithmetic makes large animals an extraordinary luxury, not a staple. Drinking water aboard a generation ship is 100% recycled. There is no other option. The ISS already does this. The USOS water recovery system captures humidity from cabin air, processes urine, and recycles the output into potable water at approximately 93% efficiency. Astronauts drink their own processed urine. They have been doing it for years. The water is clean. The psychology takes adjustment. The engineering works. But 93% is not 100%. 7% of water processed through the ISS system is lost to inefficiency, to absorption in materials, to impurities that must be purged. On the ISS, that deficit is covered by water launched from Earth on resupply missions. On a generation ship, it accumulates. If a generation ship loses just 1% of its total water inventory per year through system inefficiencies, which would actually represent a significant improvement over current ISS performance. The mathematics are unforgiving. After 300 years, the ship has lost 26% of its original water supply, a quarter of all available water gone, with no mechanism for replacement. At some point, that loss crosses a threshold where the biological systems that depend on adequate water, the crops, the microbial decomposers, the humans themselves begin to fail in cascading sequence. The engineering target for a real generation ship is not 93% water recovery. It has to be something far closer to 99.9%, sustained without degradation across 3 centuries of operation. No technology currently demonstrated achieves that. The gap between where we are and where we need to be is not trivial. The ecosystem problem can be solved given 40 years of dedicated research. But there is no ecosystem solution for this. You only have 40,000 genomes aboard, and the universe does not care about that at all. The human genome contains approximately 3 billion base pairs of DNA, the most complex information storage system ever discovered in the known universe. That blueprint, encoded in every cell of every person alive, carries within it the accumulated evolutionary history of a species that has survived ice ages, pandemics, famines, and mass migrations across every continent on Earth. The diversity written into that genetic code is not decoration, it is armor. Different immune system variants protect against different pathogens. Different metabolic profiles allow survival under different environmental stresses. Different neurological architectures produce different problem-solving approaches. Genetic diversity is, at its core, a civilization's long-term insurance policy against the unexpected. And for most of human history, that diversity has been maintained almost automatically by large interbreeding populations, geographic movement, the constant mixing of lineages that comes with being a species of 8 billion people spread across a planet. A generationship changes that equation completely. Population genetics has a concept called the minimum viable population, MVP, the threshold below which an isolated group begins experiencing irreversible genetic deterioration. Drop beneath it, and a cascade of biological consequences becomes increasingly difficult to stop. In 2014, Cameron Smith of Portland State University published research in Acta Astronautica specifically modeling the genetic requirements for an interstellar voyage. His findings were unambiguous, and for anyone who imagined a generation ship as a few hundred brave pioneers in a vessel the size of a large aircraft carrier, deeply uncomfortable. To maintain sufficient genetic diversity across a 200-year journey, Smith calculated a founding population of between 10,000 and 40,000 people, not 1,000, not 500, not a shuttle full of carefully selected astronauts. 40,000 human beings, minimum. If you want the population that arrives at the destination to be biologically viable, you are thinking about the future of our species. But DNA doesn't think. It calculates probabilities. And across generations of isolation, those probabilities begin working against you in ways no amount of good intentions can reverse. The mechanism is well documented in nature, and the examples are not encouraging. Every cheetah alive today, all 7,000 plus wild individuals is, in genetic terms, essentially a sibling. Approximately 12,000 years ago, the cheetah population was nearly wiped out by an extinction event, reducing the breeding population to a critical minimum. What survived passed through that genetic bottleneck, and the resulting population carried almost no allelic variation. The consequences persist to this day. Cheetahs have compromised immune systems, abnormally low reproductive rates, and extreme vulnerability to infectious disease. In controlled experiments, cheetahs accept skin grafts from unrelated individuals without rejection, something that should not happen between genetically distinct mammals because their immune systems lack the variation to distinguish self from non-self. They are, genetically speaking, running on a single software build with no backup versions. The last Neanderthals tell a parallel story. Genomic analysis of late Neanderthal remains reveals extremely low genetic diversity, consistent with a population that had contracted to dangerously small numbers in its final millennia. The evidence suggests a community so genetically impoverished that harmful recessive mutations, the kind that normally get masked by functional dominant alleles in a diverse population, were increasingly expressing themselves. Genetic deterioration did not cause Neanderthal extinction alone, but it almost certainly contributed to the fragility that made them unable to recover. The process responsible in both cases is called inbreeding depression. In a small, messy, isolated population, recessive deleterious alleles, genetic variants that cause developmental defects, infertility, immune dysfunction, metabolic disease accumulate across generations. In a large, diverse population, the probability that both parents carry the same harmful recessive variant is low enough that the gene rarely expresses itself. Shrink the population, restrict the gene pool, and the math changes. After 5 to 7 generations of limited genetic mixing, those hidden variants start surfacing. Birth defects increase. Fertility drops. The population's biological resilience, its capacity to withstand disease, environmental stress, the random insults that nature delivers to every living system quietly erodes. Think of it this way. Imagine a company that only promotes from within, never hires outside talent, and draws its entire leadership pipeline from the same 24 founding families for 20 years. Eventually, the organization shares the same intellectual blind spots, the same risk tolerances, the same cognitive defaults. Nobody sees the problems that an outside perspective would catch immediately. The company doesn't collapse dramatically, it just becomes progressively less capable of adapting until it can't. A genetically bottlenecked population operates on exactly the same principle, except the stakes are not quarterly earnings. They are survival. One proposed solution is cryogenic gamete banking, carrying aboard the ship a frozen repository of sperm and egg cells from 100,000 to 200,000 genetically diverse donors, to be drawn upon across generations as a kind of controlled genetic injection into the living population. The basic technology exists. Fairfax Cryobank in Virginia, one of the largest sperm banks in the United States, has demonstrated that human sperm stored at -196 degrees Celsius in liquid nitrogen remains viable across decades of storage. Embryo cryopreservation, standard practice at fertility clinics across the country, has produced hundreds of thousands of successful pregnancies from frozen material. The cryogenic infrastructure required to maintain such a bank on a generation ship is not science fiction. The concept is elegant in the abstract. Instead of limiting the ship's living genetic pool to 40,000 people, you effectively carry the genomes of 200,000. When the ship's genetic monitoring systems detect that a particular allele cluster is becoming dangerously underrepresented in the living population, you draw from the frozen archive and introduce new genetic material into the next generation. A slow, deliberate infusion of diversity across centuries. But the moment you move from abstract concept to operational reality, questions surface that no technical specification can answer. Who decides which frozen donor's material gets used? And when, based on what criteria? Who sits on the committee that makes that determination? And who holds them accountable? What happens when a family objects? And if the bank carries samples from 200,000 people who died on Earth centuries before the ship arrives anywhere, people who never consented to have their genetics used in a managed breeding program across multiple generations of strangers, what exactly is the ethical framework governing their use? Essentially, you need a bioethics committee for every child born on the ship. Which sounds remarkably efficient. Genetics gives you the numbers. But no formula accounts for this. Humans are not equations, and a closed space has its own way of breaking minds long before it breaks DNA. In vitro fertilization has been a medical reality since 1978, when Louise Brown became the first human being conceived outside a human body in a laboratory in Oldham, England. Since then, the technology has produced more than 10 million successful births worldwide. Embryo cryopreservation. Freezing fertilized embryos for later use is now so routine that fertility clinics across the United States collectively store hundreds of thousands of frozen embryos at any given time. Couples delay parenthood for a decade, preserve embryos before cancer treatment, use donor genetics when biology fails them. The technology is normalized, regulated, and almost unremarkable in the context of modern reproductive medicine. It is, on Earth, always a choice. Now place that same technology inside a generation ship 150 years into its journey, and watch what the word choice does. The ship's genetic monitoring system, a function so critical it runs on triple redundant hardware flags. A warning HLA, haplotype diversity in the current living population, has dropped below the safety threshold established in the original mission parameters. The allele combinations that protect against certain classes of autoimmune disease are underrepresented. Without intervention, within 3 generations, the population's immune resilience will be measurably compromised. The Genetic Oversight Council convenes. It identifies 12 specific donor profiles from the cryogenic archive that would optimally address the deficit. It issues guidance, or perhaps something stronger than guidance, that certain women in their reproductive years should consider, or be required, to carry pregnancies using archived donor material from samples frozen in the year 2075? The 5th generation aboard that ship, people born in deep space, who have never seen a sky, who know Earth only as something their great-grandparents described, receives a directive about their own bodies, their own pregnancies, their own children, issued in the name of a mission they did not choose, and validated by a genetic model they cannot personally evaluate. This is no longer medicine. It is the governance of bodies. Managing the genetic health of a generation ship population requires controlling variables that, on Earth, belong entirely to individual autonomy. Birth rate must be monitored against resource availability and population carrying capacity. Too many births in a bad year strains food production. Too few in a good year risks demographic collapse 2 generations later. Sex ratio must be actively balanced, because even a modest skew compounds across generations into structural instability. Blood type distribution matters for medical preparedness, and human leukocyte antigen diversity. The HLA system that governs immune recognition and transplant compatibility must be actively preserved, because HLA homogeneity is one of the clearest early signals of population-level immune vulnerability. Software tools for genetic compatibility management are not hypothetical. Iceland uses an application called Islendingabók, the Book of Icelanders, which allows citizens to check their degree of genetic relatedness to any other Icelander before entering a romantic relationship. Iceland's population is small and historically isolated enough that accidental close cousin pairings are a genuine concern. The app is voluntary, culturally normalized, and mildly famous for the tagline, "Bump the app before you bump in bed." It works because participation is optional and the stakes of non-compliance are personal, not civilizational. On a generation ship, the equivalent system would not be optional. It could not be. When the survival of 40,000 people depends on maintaining specific genetic parameters across 15 generations, the margin for individual non-compliance is effectively 0. The system is not a recommendation. It is law with enforcement mechanisms that, in a closed environment with no external courts and no place to appeal beyond the ship itself, would necessarily look very different from anything in the American legal tradition. The ethical questions that follow are not edge cases. They are the central operating reality of daily life aboard the ship. What happens to a couple who want children together, but whose HLA profiles are too similar, who would, under the ship's genetic law, be prohibited from conceiving naturally? Do they accept state-mandated donor genetics in their pregnancy? Or do they face consequences? And what are those consequences in a society where exile is not possible and prison reduces the productive population? A child born from archived donor material in year 150 of the voyage carries the genetics of someone who died on Earth 80 years before that child's birth. That person never met anyone aboard the ship, never agreed to parent a child in deep space. never imagined their biological contribution would be deployed by an algorithm in a committee meeting they could not attend. The child who results from that process, what does identity mean for them? Who is their father? A frozen sample in a cryo drawer, selected by a council acting on population genetics models. The man who raised them, both neither. These are not philosophical puzzles reserved for academic journals. They are the lived questions of real people, born into a reality they did not engineer, carrying the weight of decisions made before they existed. And underneath all of it runs the deepest tension the ship's governance designers will never fully resolve: the right of 40,000 living individuals to make choices about their own bodies, against the survival requirement of the civilization that contains them. In a closed system with no exit, when those two things conflict, and they will conflict, something has to yield. History suggests it will not be the system. Control the genes. That doesn't mean you control the mind. Because the most dangerous thing aboard that ship is not a failing reactor or a depleted oxygen supply. It is the human brain locked inside a sealed metal box with no way out. The Amundsen Scott South Pole Station sits at an elevation of 2,835 meters on the Antarctic Plateau, where winter temperatures routinely drop to negative 60 degrees Celsius, and the sun disappears completely for 6 months of the year. During winter over, the skeleton crew, typically around 50 researchers and support staff, cannot leave. No flights in, no flights out. Complete isolation from the rest of humanity. They work, eat, sleep, and exist in a structure about the size of a large high school, surrounded by nothing but darkness and ice in every direction for thousands of kilometers. And they manage. Psychological research conducted in partnership with NASA and the National Science Foundation over decades has documented their coping patterns, their stress responses, their group dynamics. The data is remarkably instructive for anyone thinking seriously about long-duration space missions, because what Antarctic winter overcrews demonstrate is that human beings can endure extraordinary isolation and deprivation while maintaining functional cognition and social coherence. What the research also documents, with equal precision, is exactly why they manage, because every single person at that station knows, with absolute certainty, that spring will come, the planes will return, the sun will rise again, they will go home. That knowledge, not the warmth, not the sunlight, not the social variety, is the psychological load-bearing structure underneath everything else. The endpoint is real, it is visible, and it is coming. Remove that, and you have a completely different problem. On a generation ship, there is no spring, no flight home, no endpoint that any living person aboard will ever experience. The crew of the first-generation boards, knowing they will die in transit. Their children are born knowing the same, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. For every person who will ever live on that vessel through decade after decade of recycled air, artificial light, and the same 40,000 faces, the ship is not a temporary hardship to be endured. It is the totality of existence. There is no after. NASA and NSF research into the winter over syndrome has identified a consistent cluster of effects that emerge after 8 to 12 months of polar isolation, measurable cognitive decline, particularly in working memory and executive function, increased incidence of depression and anxiety disorders, elevated interpersonal conflict within small groups, and a characteristic emotional blunting that researchers sometimes describe as a kind of psychological hibernation. The brain, deprived of stimulation and novelty, begins conserving itself. The HISEAS experiments the Hawaii space. Exploration analog and simulation studies conducted on the slopes of Mauna Loa to simulate long-duration Mars missions pushed this further. 6 crew members lived in a dome approximately 11 meters in diameter for missions of up to 12 months, following Mars communication protocols, wearing spacesuits for any outdoor activity, with no unmediated contact with the outside world. The findings were not dramatic in a cinematic sense. They were worse than dramatic. After 12 months, crew members had largely stopped talking to each other, except when operationally necessary. Social interaction had been reduced to the functional minimum, not because of hatred or conflict, but because sustained close-quarters existence had simply exhausted whatever social energy the individuals possessed. You can fix a reactor, you can grow food, but can you repair a person who has lost the will to continue? The brain is not designed for this. It evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in open landscapes, under variable skies, moving through diverse environments, encountering new people and situations and sensory inputs in ways that kept its threat detection and reward systems appropriately calibrated. The human nervous system requires certain inputs to remain stable natural light cycles that entrain the circadian rhythm, open visual fields that allow the eyes to focus at distances beyond a few meters, social variety that introduces genuine novelty into interpersonal experience, and short-term goals with visible, tangible outcomes. A sealed spacecraft violates all of these simultaneously. The light is artificial and constant. The visual field terminates at a metal wall. The social pool never changes the same 40,000 people for an entire lifetime, with no additions and no exits except death. And the central goal, reaching a destination, is so distant, so abstract, so remote from daily sensory experience, that it functions not as motivation, but as a kind of permanent background abstraction that the mind eventually stops engaging with. The closest analogy in the existing human experience is solitary confinement. In American correctional facilities, prisoners held in solitary 22 to 24 hours per day without meaningful social contact typically begin showing signs of hallucination, paranoia, and cognitive disintegration within 7 to 10 days. The mechanism is well documented. The brain, denied external input, begins generating its own, and the results are not healthy. The generation ship is not solitary confinement. In the strict sense, there are 40,000 people aboard. After all, but it shares its most psychologically corrosive feature, the complete impossibility of leaving. You cannot step outside. You cannot seek new environments. You cannot put physical distance between yourself and the person you are in conflict with. The walls are permanent. The population is fixed. Every grievance, every personality clash, every accumulated resentment exists in a space where the parties involved will continue encountering each other until one of them dies. That structural feature, inescapability, transforms small conflicts into large ones in ways that open societies naturally prevent through the release valve of departure. Studies of isolated communities with no exit options, including Antarctic stations, long-term submarine deployments, and incarcerated populations, consistently find that per capita rates of interpersonal violence increase by a factor of 3 to 5 after 18 to 24 months of inescapable proximity. Scale that to 40,000 people across 300 years with no external intervention mechanism, and the threat is not abstract. Turns out the biggest challenge of an interstellar voyage is not black holes or cosmic radiation. It's the fact that Bob from level 12 plays his music too loud at 2 in the morning, and you have to look at his face for the rest of your life. If the problem is architecture, then the solution has to start with architecture. And the blueprint for that solution is so audacious, it makes you stop and ask, is this a spacecraft? Or is this a new planet? Artificial gravity through rotation is one of those ideas that sounds exotic until you spend 30 seconds thinking about the physics, at which point it becomes obvious. Spin a structure fast enough around a central axis, and the centrifugal force pressing outward on the inner surface is functionally indistinguishable from gravity pressing downward. You have experienced the principle yourself. Swing a bucket of water in a vertical circle, and the water stays in the bucket at the top of the ark, held there not by magic, but by the same rotational mechanics that would pin your feet to the floor of a spinning cylinder. The physics requires no new discoveries. It is completely understood, entirely classical, and has been since the 19th century. What Gerard K. O'Neill did at Princeton in 1974 was take that simple principle and push it to a scale most people's imaginations simply refused to follow. The mathematics of artificial gravity through rotation work out cleanly. To generate a gravitational equivalent of 1g, the pull you feel standing on Earth's surface right now, at a radius of 900 meters, the structure needs to complete 1 full rotation per minute, 1 revolution per minute. That is extremely slow. A ceiling fan operates at roughly 100 revolutions per minute. The rotational requirement for comfortable artificial gravity is not an engineering barrier. It is almost trivially achievable. O'Neill's design consisted of 2 massive counter-rotating cylinders paired to cancel out gyroscopic effects that would otherwise make the structure resist directional changes each 8 kilometers in diameter and 32 kilometers in length. The interior surface of each cylinder, curving up and over and around the axis, provides approximately 800 square kilometers of habitable area. 800 square kilometers. That is roughly the land area of New York City. Inside those cylinders, actual soil, real trees, lakes and rivers, agricultural zones, urban neighborhoods, a sky, not a painted ceiling, not a screen, but a carefully engineered system of long mirrors running the length of the cylinder that redirect actual sunlight, creating a day and night cycle as the mirrors rotate and occlude. Clouds can form, weather can happen. You could, theoretically, stand at one end of the cylinder and look up and see forest curving overhead kilometers away, green and continuous, wrapping completely around the inside of the structure. The population such a design could support ranges from tens of thousands to, in larger theoretical variants, millions of people. You're already thinking it. Who could possibly build this nobody on Earth? The materials alone, if lifted from a planetary surface against gravity, would cost more than the entire global economy several times over. That's exactly why this question has the wrong premise. In space, the construction calculus inverts entirely. Asteroid mining operations already under active development by multiple companies can access raw iron, nickel, aluminum, and silicates in quantities that dwarf Earth's entire extracted mineral history, without fighting any planetary gravity well to reach them. Gravitix, a Seattle-based aerospace company, is currently developing expandable space habitat modules designed to scale into rotating structures. Construction in microgravity requires a fraction of the structural support that Earth-based construction demands. The cost of building an O'Neill cylinder in space using asteroidal material processed in orbit has been estimated at roughly 1 to 2% of the cost of attempting an equivalent construction on Earth's surface. Not cheaper, radically, categorically cheaper. Jeff Bezos has publicly and repeatedly described the O'Neill cylinder concept as his long-term vision for human civilization in space, and Blue Origin's architectural and engineering work has been explicitly shaped around it. The psychological case for this scale of habitat is not aesthetic preference. It is biological necessity, and the distinction matters enormously. The human brain does not respond to simulated open space the way it responds to actual open space. Neuroimaging research is consistent on this point. Screens, even high-resolution immersive screens, activate the visual cortex in patterns that measurably differ from genuine environmental exposure. The brain knows the difference. You cannot fool it into the calm, restorative neural state associated with natural environments using pixels, however convincing. A crew that lives their entire lives in front of screens showing forests is not receiving the same neurological input as a crew that walks through one. Inside an O'Neill cylinder, the open space is real. The visual field extends kilometers in every direction. The curved interior provides genuine geographic diversity. You can design forest zones, open agricultural plains, dense urban neighborhoods, even a simulated coastal area with a body of water large enough to produce small waves. Different environments create different sensory experiences, and sensory variety is one of the brain's primary defenses against the kind of psychological erosion that prolonged confinement produces. The day-night cycle created by the mirror system is not a cosmetic feature. Circadian rhythm, the internal biological clock that governs sleep, hormone secretion, immune function, and mood regulation, depends on light exposure that changes in quality and intensity over a roughly 24-hour period. Populations deprived of natural light cycling show elevated rates of insomnia, depression, metabolic disruption, and immune suppression. An O'Neill cylinder with a properly engineered mirror system gives every inhabitant a real dawn, a real dusk, and a sky that shifts from the blue of midday to the warm register of late afternoon. The brain receives the signals it was designed to receive, and the downstream effects on psychological health are measurable and significant. There's also the matter of visual horizon. Research in environmental psychology has consistently found that humans need the capacity to focus their eyes at distances of several kilometers on a regular basis to maintain baseline anxiety regulation. A generation ship corridor, no matter how wide, cannot provide that. An 8-kilometer diameter cylinder can, standing anywhere on the interior surface. You can look across the open space of the cylinder to the far side kilometers of air and light between you and the curved ground above. The brain gets its horizon. The anxiety response, chronically activated by visual confinement, has something to release against. Essentially, the cure for psychological breakdown in space is build a city in space that spins. Simple as that. Architecture can protect individual psychology, but no cylinder, no green space, no engineered horizon resolves this. Who has the right to give orders to generations not yet born? In 1787, the men gathered in Philadelphia to draft the United States Constitution faced a problem they understood with remarkable clarity. They were writing rules for a future they could not see. The world of 1850 would be unrecognizable to them. The world of 1950, incomprehensible. And yet, the document they produced has governed an evolving nation for nearly 2.5 centuries, not because it was perfect, but because its authors were wise enough to know it wasn't. They deliberately built in the amendment process a mechanism acknowledging that future generations would need to revise what the founders had written, and providing a structured path to do exactly that. The Constitution was designed to be changed. That capacity for self-correction is precisely what has allowed it to survive. Every functional government on Earth operates on a version of the same principle. Elections cycle leadership. Courts interpret and reinterpret law. Constitutions get amended. Citizens who disagree with the direction of their society have options: vote, organize, protest, or as a last resort, leave, move to a different state, emigrate to a different country. The exit option is rarely exercised, but its existence fundamentally shapes the social contract. Compliance is, at some level, chosen. That choice is what gives governance its legitimacy. A generation ship has no exit, none. Not for anyone, at any point, under any circumstances. There is no other jurisdiction to appeal to, no neighboring country to emigrate toward, no wilderness to disappear into. If you profoundly disagree with how the ship is governed, if you find the laws unjust, the leadership corrupt, the social contract intolerable, your options are comply, resist within the ship's own legal framework, or face consequences in a closed system where every consequence lands in the same sealed space you cannot leave. Compliance is not chosen. It is the only viable path to continued survival. Food, water, air, medical care, all of it flows through systems controlled by the ship's governance structure. Dissent without compliance is not civil disobedience. It is a slow negotiation with death. When compliance is mandatory because the alternative is dying, what exactly separates a society from a prison? That question has no comfortable answer. And the discomfort deepens when you add the dimension of time. The seventh generation aboard that ship, people born perhaps 140 years into the voyage, never signed anything. No founding document bears their name. No delegate represented their interests at the Constitutional Convention that happened before their grandparents' were born. They arrived in this situation through no decision of their own, carrying obligations they did not accept, bound by rules written by people they know only as historical figures in the ship's archives. They are, in the most precise philosophical sense, involuntary citizens of a mission they did not choose. This is the problem of intergenerational consent, and it is not a new question in political philosophy, but it has never before been posed with such absolute stakes. On Earth, future generations can eventually reshape the societies they inherit. They have tools, time, and the capacity to change their circumstances. Aboard a generation ship, the inherited structure is not just cultural and legal, it is physical. The reactor design, the ecosystem architecture, the trajectory through space, these cannot be voted away by a discontented generation without consequences that cascade immediately into biological survival. Political theorists and mission planners have proposed several governance models, each with genuine strengths and genuine failure modes. Technocracy rule by expert council is the most operationally logical. A committee of engineers, biologists, physicians, and system specialists makes decisions based on data. No populist pressure, no ideological distortion, just optimal resource allocation as computed by the people who understand the systems involved. The appeal is obvious. The problem is equally obvious legitimacy. A population that has no meaningful input into decisions affecting every aspect of their existence, their food, their reproduction, their living arrangements, their children's education, will eventually stop accepting those decisions as binding, regardless of how technically correct they are. Technocracy optimizes systems. It does not generate the consent of the governed. And without consent, enforcement becomes coercion, and coercion in a closed system becomes something much darker over generations. Representative democracy preserves the appearance of consent through elections, which matters psychologically even when the structural options are constrained. But democratic governance on a generation ship requires a constitutionally protected core, a set of operational principles that no elected majority can override. Nobody gets to vote to disable the water recycling system because they find it philosophically offensive. Nobody gets to redirect reactor power away from the agricultural lighting because the current council has a short-term political incentive to do so. Some decisions must be permanently beyond the reach of democratic process. Traditional or religious governance has sustained communities across centuries in Earth's history with remarkable stability. The rules are sacred, the authority is divine or ancestral, and compliance is a matter of identity rather than coercion. Several isolated communities have maintained coherent social structures for hundreds of years this way. The cost is innovation. Systems that derive their authority from tradition are structurally resistant to change, and adaptive, responsive change is exactly what a 300-year voyage through unpredictable conditions will repeatedly demand. The historical case study that mission planners probably don't want to look at too closely is Pitcairn Island. In 1789, the Bounty mutineers and their Tahitian companions settled on a remote Pacific island so isolated that it wasn't officially rediscovered for nearly 20 years. For several generations, the community managed. Then, without any external accountability mechanism, without any outside institution capable of intervention, the governance structure began to rot from the inside. Violence emerged. Abuse became systematic. Power consolidated in ways that served the powerful and harmed everyone else. The community could not reform itself because it had no external reference point, no outside authority, no mechanism for appeal beyond the island's own corrupted institutions. The parallels to a sealed interstellar vessel are not metaphorical. They are structural. The most dangerous governance failure mode is not revolution. It is something quieter, slower, and far harder to detect until it is too late. Institutional drift. The laws and protocols written by the founding generation are designed for conditions they understood: the ship as it was built, the population as it was constituted, the mission as it was conceived. By Generation 8, the ship has 300 years of accumulated modifications, workarounds, cultural evolution, and circumstantial change layered on top of the original design. The laws, written for a reality that no longer exists, are increasingly disconnected from the daily operational facts of life aboard. But nobody has formal authority to rewrite them, because the founders decided carries a weight that no living generation can openly challenge without appearing to attack the mission itself. The system freezes. The gap between written law and lived reality widens. Resentment accumulates in that gap, invisible and unmeasured, until something, a crisis, a charismatic figure, a single flashpoint incident releases it all at once. This is not a hypothetical trajectory. It is a pattern observable in every long-duration institutional history humanity has produced. Organizations that cannot adapt to changed circumstances do not gradually improve. They accumulate brittleness until they break. Law can be written, but no document prevents this when Earth is nothing but legend. What reason remains to obey the rules of people dead for centuries? Democracy rests on one foundational principle: the majority decides. Not the wisest, not the most qualified, the majority. That principle has produced extraordinary outcomes in human governance: pluralism, accountability, the peaceful transfer of power, the slow and imperfect but genuine expansion of rights across centuries. It is the least bad system humanity has found for managing collective decision-making at scale. Brexit demonstrated something important about democracy that often gets lost in the political noise surrounding it. The United Kingdom, regardless of whether the decision was wise, had the right to hold that referendum. A sovereign population voted to change their relationship with a larger political structure. The consequences were complex, the execution messy, the economic effects debated for years afterward. But the act itself, a people exercising self-determination over their collective future, was legitimate. That legitimacy is real, and it matters. Now carry that principle aboard a generation ship and watch what it does. The voyage is 300 years. The ship is at the midpoint, year 150. The generation currently alive has spent their entire existence in transit, born to parents who were themselves born in space, with no direct experiential connection to Earth or to Proxima Centauri. Both are abstractions. Both are inherited obligations from people they never met. The Governance Council convenes a referendum on a question that has been quietly building for decades: should the mission continue? 51% vote to turn back toward Earth. Democracy has spoken. Except the ship cannot simply turn around. At interstellar cruise velocity, a reversal maneuver requires enormous fuel expenditure, fuel that was budgeted for deceleration at the destination, not for a mid-journey course reversal. The navigational math was done at launch for one trajectory, one endpoint, one arrival scenario. A return journey was never part of the design envelope, and even if the fuel somehow existed, the Earth these people are trying to return to has changed beyond recognition over 150 years. The societies that launched them are gone, replaced by whatever came after. There is no home to return to, only a planet that shares a name with the home in their history books. If the reversal is attempted anyway, burning fuel the mission cannot afford, reversing a trajectory that was never designed to reverse the generations that follow, will inherit neither a destination nor an origin. Generations 15, 16, and 17 will drift, not toward anything. Just drift in a vessel with depleted fuel and degrading systems, with nowhere to go and no mission to justify the ongoing sacrifice of survival. Can a majority legally vote for the extinction of all subsequent generations? Does the democratic right of the living extend to foreclosing every option of the not yet born? And if it does, what exactly is democracy protecting? The philosophical question at the center of this is one that political theory has circled for decades without resolution. Do future generations have rights, not legal rights? In the current sense, they cannot vote, cannot sue, cannot organize, but moral rights. The right not to have their existence made impossible by the choices of people who happened to be alive earlier. If future generations have any legitimate claim on the present, then pure democratic rule of the current population cannot be the final authority on decisions that will determine whether those future generations exist at all. Some constraints must be placed beyond the reach of any majority, not because democracy is wrong, but because some decisions are irreversible in ways that no subsequent election can correct. Anders Sandberg at the Future of Humanity Institute has proposed that a generationship's governance document be structured in 3 distinct tiers, each with different thresholds for modification. The first tier covers physical survival parameters, reactor operation, atmospheric composition maintenance, water recycling, trajectory commitment. These provisions are irrevocable. No vote changes them. No crisis suspends them. They are not law in the political sense. They are closer to physics, the minimum conditions under which the civilization continues to exist. No one votes to turn off oxygen. The second tier covers social and economic structure property arrangements, labor allocation, resource distribution, political representation. These can be changed, but only by a supermajority of 2/3 of the adult population, ratified across 2 successive generations. The double generation requirement is deliberate. It prevents a single passionate cohort from making structural changes that the next generation, which must live with the consequences, would never have chosen. Change is possible, but slow enough to be deliberate. The third tier covers everything else: culture, religion, artistic expression, personal belief, social custom. These change freely, by whatever process the community naturally evolves. No governance mechanism controls them, because controlling them would destroy the social vitality the mission needs to survive psychologically. The elegance of the 3-tier model is that it resolves the central paradox, protecting mission-critical constants while preserving genuine political agency without pretending the tension between them doesn't exist. The first tier acknowledges that some things cannot be democratic without becoming suicidal. The second tier acknowledges that everything else must be, or the social compact collapses. The third tier acknowledges that human beings are not only survival machines, and that culture is not a luxury, but a load-bearing element of any civilization that intends to last 3 centuries. Turns out the hardest problem in interstellar travel isn't fuel or oxygen. It's drafting a constitution smart enough that no one can use it to vote for collective suicide. Any lawyers want to try governance can be designed, but no law enforces itself after 150 years unless Generation 8 still knows why that law exists. And this is where everything becomes truly frightening. The entire publicly accessible internet, every web page, every database, every digitized book and research paper and technical manual humanity has produced amounts to roughly 5 billion gigabytes of data. All of it, every scrap, could be stored on a 1 terabyte drive that fits in your jacket pocket. A generation ship could carry not just one copy, but 10,000 redundant copies of the complete sum of human knowledge, every medical textbook ever written, every engineering specification ever published, every maintenance manual for every complex system ever built, every scientific paper from every discipline across the entire history of organized research. Call it the Library of Alexandria, rebuilt and multiplied. Indestructible, perfectly indexed, instantly searchable, available to every person aboard at any moment. And it would not be enough, not even close. Information is not knowledge. That distinction sounds like a philosophical nicety until you sit with the actual implications. And then it becomes one of the most practically consequential truths in all of engineering. Consider this scenario. The ship's fission reactor develops an anomalous vibration in its primary coolant loop pump on year 132. The maintenance archive contains 10,000 pages of reactor documentation, complete engineering schematics, failure mode analysis, repair protocols for every component ever installed. The information is perfect. The information is there. But the last engineer, who actually worked on a live reactor coolant system, died 11 years ago, and her apprentice transferred to agricultural systems management a decade before that. And the current generation of reactor technicians has maintained the system in its normal operating state for their entire careers without ever opening the primary loop. The manual says to do X. But experienced reactor engineers know that on this particular reactor model, after a certain number of thermal cycles, X needs to be modified to X prime, not because the documentation is wrong, but because a subtle material behavior that only becomes apparent after decades of operation creates a condition the original spec writers couldn't fully anticipate. That modification lives in no document. It lived in the hands of the engineer who figured it out through experience, who taught it to her apprentice by standing next to her and saying, "Feel that that's what wrong sounds like." Now, both of them are gone. The documentation is perfect. The knowledge is dead. The most complete library ever assembled, and no one knows how to use anything in it. Is that a civilization, or is it a ruin? The philosopher Michael Polanyi spent much of his career articulating what he called tacit knowledge, the vast domain of human competence that cannot be fully captured in explicit form. His formulation was elegant and devastating. We know more than we can tell. A master craftsman knows things about their material that they genuinely cannot put into words, not from reluctance, but from the nature of that knowledge itself. It lives in the body, in the cultivated sensitivity of trained hands and eyes and ears, in the pattern recognition accumulated across thousands of repetitions until it operates below conscious thought. A skilled physician diagnosing a patient isn't simply running through a decision tree of symptoms. They are drawing on thousands of previous cases, on subtle signals that never appear in any textbook, the specific quality of a patient's color, the way they hold themselves, a barely perceptible hesitation in their breathing that aggregate into a clinical intuition that is genuinely not reducible to any written protocol. That intuition is not mystical. It is learned. But it is learned through direct experience, through proximity to expertise, through the long apprenticeship of watching someone who knows what they are doing and gradually internalizing what that looks like. Nuclear reactor engineers develop something similar. The manual tells you the acceptable vibration range for the coolant pump. Experience tells you that a particular frequency within that acceptable range, combined with a specific temperature profile at a specific point in the operational cycle, is an early indicator of a seal beginning to fail, something that won't trip any alarm for another 3 months, but will cause a serious incident if not addressed in the next 2 weeks. That knowledge doesn't come from reading. It comes from having been in the room when the seal failed the first time, from having talked to the engineer who caught it early the second time, from the accumulated institutional memory that only stays alive as long as living people carry it and pass it on. Tacit knowledge cannot be digitized. It can only be transmitted person to person, teacher to apprentice, hand to hand. The structural response that mission planners have converged on is called mandatory trade rotation, a requirement that every adult citizen aboard the ship must maintain active competency in at least 2 critical technical disciplines, with regular practical assessments rather than just written examinations. The doctor who manages the ship's medical ward must also be capable of diagnosing and responding to a failure in the hydroponic nutrient delivery system. The agricultural technician tending the soybean beds must know emergency trauma response. The reactor engineer must understand the basics of the closed ecological systems. The idea is to create a distributed knowledge network, a dense web of overlapping competency that has no single point of failure, no single death, no single generation's negligence, can create a complete gap in any critical domain, because that domain is always held by multiple people from multiple backgrounds who approached it from different directions. The logic is sound. The implementation problem is human nature. Genuine mastery of a technical skill requires sustained engagement under real pressure. The reason surgical residents work brutal hours in their training is not institutional sadism. It is because the volume and variety of genuine emergencies handled under supervision creates the experiential foundation that no simulation can fully replicate. People learn deeply when the stakes are real and immediate. They learn a simulacrum of knowledge when the stakes are abstract and distant. By generation 6 or 7 aboard the ship, no living person has experienced a life-threatening reactor failure, a catastrophic crop collapse, or a medical emergency beyond the scope of normal clinical management. The systems have worked. The redundancies have held. The training protocols produce people who are technically literate, who can pass the assessments, who know the procedures, who have done the simulations, but who carry their knowledge the way most people carry their first aid certification, competent on paper, untested in reality. The gap between documented knowledge and operational expertise quietly widens with each passing generation of stability. Invisible until the first major failure makes it catastrophically visible. The generation ship educational system does have one undeniable advantage over anything that exists on Earth. No student can plausibly ask when they will ever use this in real life. Every subject taught, without exception, is literally a matter of life and death for everyone aboard. That is what you might call motivated learning. Technical knowledge can be preserved through systems, but no system preserves the will. And when the will disappears, no reactor, no star map, no survival manual saves the ship. At its peak, the Apollo program employed approximately 400,000 people working toward a single, precisely defined objective: land human beings on the moon and return them safely to Earth. The mission statement required no interpretation. The timeline was measurable in years, not centuries. Every engineer at every contractor facility across the country could draw a direct line between their specific work, a valve assembly, a guidance calculation, a heat shield test, and the moment Neil Armstrong's boots touched the lunar surface, the goal was concrete. The connection between daily effort and ultimate outcome was visible, legible, and emotionally resonant. That alignment between individual action and collective mission is one of the most powerful motivational forces in human organizational psychology. When people can see, clearly and directly, how what they do today connects to what matters, they work with a quality of commitment that no incentive structure can manufacture. The Generation Ship's founding mission statement is equally clear: reach Proxima B within 300 years. Simple, urgent, meaningful to the generation that writes it, boards the ship, and watches Earth shrink to a pale dot through whatever viewport the hull provides. Year 200. Generation 10 is alive. They were born in space. Their parents were born in space. Their grandparents' parents were born in space. Earth is not a memory for any of them. It is a category in the historical archive, described by people who described people who described people who once stood on its surface and breathed its air. Proxima b is equally abstract, a destination assigned to them by ancestors they know only through records, a planet they have never seen, a promise made by people who have been dead for longer than the United States has existed. Everything real is the ship, these corridors, these growing bays, these faces, this recycled air moving through these lungs. The mission reach Proxima b is not a felt imperative. It is an inherited obligation, hanging over daily life like a doctrine that everyone acknowledges and nobody personally chose. Why should I carry the mission of people dead 200 years toward a place I have never seen? What answer is sufficient? What answer is even honest? Mission drift is not a hypothetical failure mode invented by anxious futurists. It is one of the most consistently documented phenomena in institutional history, and its mechanisms are well understood. Medieval monastic orders offer the most instructive long-form case study. The Franciscans were founded in the early 13th century by Francis of Assisi around a radical commitment to poverty, itinerant service to the poor, and rejection of institutional wealth. That founding mission was not vague, it was concrete, demanding, and directly tied to daily practice. Within 200 years, Franciscan institutions controlled substantial property, managed complex financial arrangements, and were deeply embedded in the political and economic structures of European society. The poverty mission had not been openly abandoned. It had simply become progressively less operative as each successive generation made small, locally reasonable accommodations to change circumstances, until the accumulated drift had carried the organization somewhere its founder would not have recognized. The Xerox PARC story is sharper and more painful. In the 1970s, researchers at Xerox's Palo Alto Research Center invented the graphical user interface, the laser printer, Ethernet networking, and the object-oriented programming paradigm, essentially the foundational architecture of the personal computing revolution. Xerox leadership observed these inventions and did not act on them because Xerox's corporate mission was selling photocopiers. The future of computing was sitting in their own building, and they looked at it through the lens of a mission that made it invisible. Steve Jobs famously visited PARC in 1979, recognized immediately what he was looking at, and spent the next several years turning it into the Macintosh. Xerox spent those years selling photocopiers. On a generation ship, mission drift can take several distinct and equally catastrophic forms. A generation immersed in the ship's stable internal reality might reach a genuinely reasonable conclusion: why are we going anywhere? The ship works. The ecosystem is balanced. The community is functional. Why not simply decelerate, maintain position in interstellar space, and live permanently in this engineered world we have already built and learned to sustain? It is not a crazy question. It is, from a certain vantage point, a logical one. The mission's answer, because our ancestors decided we should reach Proxima b, is not an answer that survives scrutiny across 10 generations of people who had no say in that decision. Alternatively, a generation with access to updated astronomical data might determine that a different stellar system now looks more promising than Proxima b did when the mission was planned, reachable within an adjusted time frame, perhaps with better indicators of habitability. The mission as written points to one destination. New information points to another. Which authority wins the founding document or the living community's best current judgment? Or, most quietly dangerous of all, nobody asks the big question. Nobody votes to change course. Nobody debates the mission's validity. The mission just becomes background noise, something acknowledged in the ceremonial calendar, referenced in official communications, present in the architecture of the ship's culture, but no longer driving any individual's daily choices or emotional investment. The will to arrive simply evaporates, generation by generation, unremarked and unmeasured, until the people responsible for the deceleration burn in year 280 don't feel any particular urgency about it. The most serious research into this problem converges on what might be called narrative engineering, the deliberate construction of cultural systems designed to keep the mission emotionally alive across centuries without direct experiential reinforcement. The American dream is the most relevant parallel. Millions of immigrants arrived in the United States across the 19th and 20th centuries with no legal guarantee, no institutional promise, and no personal experience of the prosperity they sought. What sustained them was a story, a narrative about what this country meant and what effort within it could produce. That story was not law, it was not policy, it was culture, transmitted through family, through community, through the accumulated symbolic architecture of a society organized around a particular set of beliefs about effort and possibility. It persisted across generations, not because it was true for everyone, but because it was vivid, emotionally resonant, and woven into the fabric of daily life at every level. A generation ship can attempt the same construction deliberately. Departure Day becomes the largest annual celebration, more significant than any birthday or personal milestone, a collective ceremony of remembrance and recommitment. The name of the destination is given to the ship's central avenue, its main gathering space, its most visible landmark. The story of departure, why the founders left, what they hoped to find, what they sacrificed, is embedded in music, in visual art, in architectural symbolism, in the rituals of education from earliest childhood. Earth is kept present, not as a lost home to grieve, but as a context that makes the mission intelligible. We came from there. We are going to somewhere new. And the distance between those two facts is the meaning of this ship. The danger lurking inside every successful narrative engineering project is the same stories that sustain communities across generations tend to calcify. What begins as a living cultural framework gradually becomes doctrine, and doctrine does not tolerate questioning. A generation that asks sincerely whether the mission still makes sense, whether the destination is still worth reaching, whether the founding assumptions still hold risks, being treated not as rational inquirers, but as heretics undermining the sacred story. The difference between a civilization with a sustaining narrative and a cult with an irrevocable creed is thinner than mission planners would like to admit, and the pressure of isolation makes the boundary thinner still. The will can be engineered through culture. But the final question, the question that 300 years of travel leads to, is the one nobody wants to think about until it is already too late. On February 18, 2021, the Perseverance rover entered the Martian atmosphere at roughly 19,000 kilometers per hour. What followed was 7 minutes of fully automated terror, a supersonic parachute deploying at the right altitude, a sky crane lowering the rover on nylon cables, retro rockets firing in precise sequence. The whole choreography executing itself without a single human input. Flight controllers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena watched a screen. That was all they could do. The signal delay between Earth and Mars runs to 11 minutes each way. By the time mission controllers received confirmation that atmospheric entry had begun, the rover had already landed or crashed 11 minutes earlier. The universe had already rendered its verdict. Humanity was just waiting to hear it. Perseverance weighs 1,025 kilograms. It carries no crew. It has no opinions about dying. Now run the same scenario with 40,000 people aboard. A generation ship traveling at 5% of the speed of light, approximately 54 million kilometers per hour, cannot simply apply the brakes. There are no brakes in the conventional sense. The only mechanism available for deceleration is the same one used for acceleration thrust. Specifically, flipping the ship 180 degrees at the journey's midpoint and firing the engines in the direction of travel, converting forward momentum into a long, grinding deceleration burn that must begin not weeks or months before arrival, but decades. At 5% light speed, the deceleration phase alone consumes the better part of 50 years and expends the majority of the remaining fuel reserves. The timing cannot be approximate. The calculation must be precise to a degree that makes the Perseverance entry sequence look casual. Get it slightly wrong start too late, miscalculate the fuel burn rate, encounter an unforeseen navigational variable, and the ship does not arrive? It passes through the destination system at residual velocity, unable to stop, unable to reverse, carrying 40,000 people past the only endpoint the mission was ever designed to reach. Not catastrophically, not with an explosion, just quietly, unstoppably, into the dark beyond. 300 years of travel. One chance. No retry. The engineering challenge of interstellar deceleration has two components, and both of them are brutal. The first is fuel. A ship designed to decelerate from 5% light speed using conventional thrust must carry enough propellant to execute that burn, and that propellant must be carried the entire journey. From launch day, adding to the mass that the engines must push through space for 3 centuries before the fuel is ever used, the rocket equation hits again. Harder than before, every kilogram of deceleration fuel is a kilogram that must be accelerated to cruise velocity at launch, which requires more fuel to accelerate it, which increases launch mass, which requires more fuel still. Mission architects have proposed alternatives: a magnetic sail, a superconducting loop generating a field that interacts with the interstellar medium, or the destination star's solar wind to produce drag, could theoretically slow the ship without burning any propellant at all. The physics are sound. The engineering has never been attempted at any scale. On the day the ship arrives, the magnetic sail either works or it doesn't, and there is no ground crew standing by to diagnose the problem. The second is information. Every navigational calculation the ship's computers perform during deceleration is based on astronomical data gathered from Earth before departure, 3 centuries old. The destination star's behavior, the orbital mechanics of its planetary system, the precise mass and position of every gravitational body the ship must account for as it decelerates into the system. All of it was measured from 4.24 light-years away, with instruments that were the best humanity had at the time they were built. What those instruments could not do is observe the system as it exists in the moment of arrival. The light reaching Earth's telescopes when the mission was planned left Proxima Centauri 4 years before it arrived. The ship itself left Earth, let's say, 20 years after that. By the time the ship reaches its destination, the navigation data it carries is 320 years out of date. Minor orbital drift, unexpected debris fields, a planetary atmosphere that has evolved differently than models predicted. Any of these could invalidate the approach calculations without warning. There are no software updates at this distance. The signal travel time from Earth to Proxima Centauri is 4.24 years each way. You send a question. You wait 8.48 years for an answer. By the time the answer arrives, the situation has changed. The ship is, in every meaningful operational sense, alone. Now add the element that no navigation calculation can account for. The destination itself may not be what anyone expected. Proxima Centauri is an M-type red dwarf, the most common class of star in the galaxy, and one of the most violent in terms of high-energy radiation output. Red dwarfs flare, not occasionally, Not mildly, they erupt in superflares that release energies orders of magnitude beyond anything our sun produces in its most active periods. Research published in the years leading up to the mid-2020s found that Proxima b, the most promising potentially habitable planet in the system, receives ultraviolet radiation at roughly 250 times the intensity that Earth receives from the Sun. 250 times. The ozone layer that protects Earth's surface life from UV damage would be systematically stripped away by that radiation bombardment over geological time. The surface of Proxima b, under those conditions, is not a place where complex chemistry persists long enough to produce biology as we understand it. The generation ship's founding generation knew this was a risk. The scientific data available at launch was incomplete. The models were uncertain. The possibility of a habitable surface was real, but not guaranteed. They launched anyway, because the alternative was never leaving at all, and the alternative was unacceptable to people who believed the species needed to reach beyond a single world. But the people making the landing decision are not the founding generation. They are the descendants of the founding generation, 15 generations removed, people who were born into this mission without choice. And the information they receive when they enter the system, the actual spectrographic data from Proxima b's atmosphere, the measured radiation flux, the real surface conditions as observed from orbit rather than inferred from Earth, may confirm that 3 centuries of sacrifice led a civilization to a world that cannot sustain them. What do you say to 40,000 people who have never known anything but this ship when you tell them the destination was a dead end? The most important question isn't whether the computers hold. It isn't whether the magnetic sail deploys correctly or the fuel calculations were right. Those are engineering problems with engineering solutions, and engineering problems are the kind that intelligent, motivated people can at least attempt to solve. The hardest question is this: if the destination proves uninhabitable, if 300 years of transit, thousands of people born and aged and buried in the hull, generation after generation, handing forward a mission they inherited rather than chose, if all of that arrives at a planet that cannot hold them. What was it for? When the Mayflower dropped anchor off the coast of what would become Plymouth, Massachusetts, in November 1620, the 102 passengers who had survived the 66-day crossing faced a decision. They were exhausted, scurvy-ridden, severely undersupplied for a New England winter, and standing on the edge of a continent they knew almost nothing about. The decision they made to disembark, to attempt settlement, to commit to this shore was terrifying by any measure. But the ship was still there. It stayed through the winter, moored in the harbor, a physical connection to everything they had left. If the colony had failed catastrophically in those first months, some fraction of the survivors could have reboarded. The return was not guaranteed, not safe, not even particularly likely, but it was physically possible. The option existed. The option mattered. Every decision the Pilgrim leadership made that winter was shaped, consciously or not, by the knowledge that not all exits were permanently closed. That knowledge changes everything about how human beings make decisions under pressure. The presence of a retreat option is not weakness. It is the psychological architecture that allows rational risk assessment. When no retreat exists, the mind shifts into a different mode entirely, one that is simultaneously more desperate and more prone to catastrophic error. When a generation ship achieves orbit around its destination after 3 centuries of transit, none of that applies. The ship is 300 years old. Every system aboard has been repaired, jury-rigged, modified, and rebuilt by people working from manuals written for a vessel that no longer quite exists in the form the original engineers designed. The reactor is running on components that have been machined by hand on board because the original parts wore out generations ago. The hull integrity is maintained by teams who have never seen the construction records because those records exist only in archives that 3 generations of archivists have been trying to keep readable. The fuel reserve, whatever remains after the deceleration burn, is not enough to go anywhere meaningful. Earth is 4.24 light-years behind them, unreachable. The destination is below them. There is no third option. Physics closed that door before the ship left the solar system. The landing decision is not, therefore, a decision in the conventional sense. It is a forced conclusion dressed in the language of choice. The question is not whether to land. The question is when, how, and at what acceptable level of risk, and in a community of 40,000 people who have spent their entire lives traveling toward this moment. Acceptable risk is not a technical determination. It is a political one. The procedurally correct approach, designed by mission planners who never had to live inside a deteriorating hull with dwindling fuel, goes something like this. Achieve stable orbit. Deploy atmospheric probes unmanned, instrumented, expendable to collect direct samples of the target planet's air. Measure radiation flux at the surface. Assess chemical composition. Map terrain for potential landing sites. Let the probes run for 5 to 10 years, building a data set comprehensive enough to make an informed determination about surface habitability. 5 to 10 years. While the ship continues to age, while the reactor continues to run on hand-machined components, while 40,000 people who have been told their entire lives that the journey was worth making because of what waited at the end, orbit a planet they can see through whatever external cameras the hull still carries close enough to observe its weather systems, close enough to watch its day cycle, close enough to feel the pull of arrival in every conversation and every meeting and every moment of daily life, while scientists and engineers and governance councils debate whether the atmospheric nitrogen ratios are acceptable. The social pressure generated by that situation is not something a governance document can fully anticipate. 300 years of inherited mission, a ship that will not last another 50, a planet visible from orbit, and a council telling 40,000 people to wait. We traveled 300 years. We are here. We go down. That argument does not require a sophisticated political movement behind it. It requires only the mathematics of human impatience applied to 3 centuries of accumulated momentum. The Council may be right that more data is needed. The Council will have an extremely difficult time making that argument to a community that has been defined by this destination since birth. The most realistic landing scenario does not involve the entire population descending to the surface at once. It involves establishing an orbital habitat, first a station built from components the ship can spare, positioned in stable orbit, serving as a transitional base while surface suitability is assessed over years or decades. Small teams descend in rotation for limited surface exposure. Data accumulates. Adaptation protocols are developed understanding how the local biology interacts with human immune systems, whether long-term radiation exposure at observed flux levels is compatible with lifespan and reproductive health, whether soil chemistry can support any form of agriculture without complete artificial mediation. This approach is the rational one. It is also the one that produces a generation of children born on the orbital station, not on the ship, not on the planet's surface. Children who grow up in a waiting room, people who inherit not a mission, but a pause, not a destination, but a question mark, not a home, but a threshold they are never quite allowed to cross. The psychological category that describes this condition does not have a clean clinical name. It is something like permanent liminality existing perpetually in the space between what was and what might be, with full commitment to neither. The founding generation chose to leave Earth. The transit generations chose to maintain the mission. The orbital generations choose nothing, because nothing has been decided for them yet. They are the inheritors of a journey that hasn't ended and a destination that hasn't been claimed. After 300 years of travel, you finally arrive. And the first real decision is, let's wait another 50 years to be certain. Humanity has always been admirably consistent in at least one respect. But the deepest question is not whether the destination planet is habitable. The deepest question is this: while you have been arguing about all of it, the fuel, the genetics, the governance, the psychology, the ecosystems, the will to arrive, you have been standing on your own generation ship the entire time. On February 14th, 1990, the Voyager 1 spacecraft, the same machine that had spent 13 years crossing the outer solar system, turned its camera back toward the inner planets at the request of Carl Sagan. What it captured became one of the most consequential photographs in human history. Earth, at a distance of approximately 6 billion kilometers, appeared as a mote of pale blue light suspended in a beam of scattered sunlight, less than a single pixel, surrounded by nothing, protected by nothing. Sagan described it as a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark, a world where everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. We look at that image and feel something like perspective. What we rarely feel, what the image somehow does not trigger, despite everything it shows, is urgency. We see the smallness and feel humbled. We do not see the fragility and feel responsible. The planet looks like a jewel. It does not look like a machine that can break. That is the single most dangerous misreading in human history. Earth is not a backdrop. It is not a stage. It is not a home in the metaphorical sense of somewhere warm and permanent that waits for you regardless of what you do to it. Earth is a life support system. It is a closed-loop biological and geochemical machine of staggering complexity that has been running continuously for 4.5 billion years, and like every machine that has ever existed, it can be broken by the people, depending on it, if those people stop paying attention to how it works. Which is to say, Earth is a generation ship. It has been one all along. The parallel is not poetic. It is structural, point by point, with no exceptions. The forests are the atmospheric scrubbers absorbing carbon dioxide, releasing oxygen, regulating humidity and temperature across continental scales, the way the ship's bioregenerative system regulates atmospheric composition across the hull. The oceans are the thermal management system absorbing solar energy, redistributing heat through circulation patterns, moderating the temperature swings that would otherwise make most of the surface uninhabitable. The ozone layer is the radiation shield 3 millimeters of stratospheric chemistry, sitting 60 kilometers above the surface, filtering out the ultraviolet radiation that would otherwise sterilize the land surface within decades. Remove any one of these systems, and the ship fails. Not slowly, not metaphorically, biologically, in cascading sequence, the way the Biosphere 2 oxygen crisis failed except at planetary scale. With 8 billion passengers and no one to pump in emergency reserves from outside, there is no resupply. That point cannot be stated plainly enough. Every atom of phosphorus cycling through the bodies of 8 billion people right now is the same phosphorus that was here when the planet formed. Every liter of fresh water available for drinking, agriculture, and industrial use is the same water that has been cycling through the atmosphere, oceans, and ground for billions of years. Nothing comes from outside. Nothing. The generation ship has no supply chain, neither does Earth. The difference is that we have been behaving as though it does. 8 billion passengers, not 8 billion individuals with separate lives and separate fates who happen to share a surface. 8 billion passengers on a vessel with one life support system. No backup hull, no escape pods, and no destination other than the future. And no planet elsewhere in this solar system or anywhere within any realistic travel distance capable of receiving even a fraction of that population if this one fails. Mars cannot. Venus cannot. There is no Proxima b waiting to absorb our surplus. The generation ship metaphor is not a rhetorical device. It is a description of the actual situation. We are moving toward the future at the rate of 1 day per day, with no option to slow down, no option to turn back, and no option to stop and reconsider. The ship is in motion. The question is only whether the life support systems are being maintained by people who understand what they are. So ask yourself, honestly, if Earth is a generation ship, and you are living on it right now, who is the chief engineer worrying about the reactor? Every problem that makes a hypothetical generation ship potentially unsurvivable has an exact counterpart in the world outside your window. Running in real time? The energy problem. A generation ship dependent on finite, non-renewable fuel will exhaust that fuel and lose everything dependent on it: propulsion, power, life support. Earth runs on fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas formed over hundreds of millions of years, being consumed within approximately 3 centuries of industrial civilization. Non-renewable, non-replaceable on any human timescale. The transition to renewable energy, solar, wind, fission, is not an environmental preference. It is the ship's engineering team figuring out how to switch from a depleting power source to a sustainable one before the depletion curve intersects the civilization curve. The problem is identical. The stakes are identical. The urgency, somehow, is not. The ecosystem problem. The Amazon rainforest is losing approximately 10,000 square kilometers per year to deforestation. 10,000 square kilometers, an area roughly the size of the state of Delaware, erased every 12 months. The Amazon produces approximately 20% of the world's oxygen through photosynthesis, regulates rainfall patterns across an entire continent, and houses an estimated 10% of all species on Earth within its canopy. It is, in the most literal functional sense, one of the largest atmospheric management systems the planet has. Degrading it is not an environmental concern isolated to the tropics. It is a malfunction in the ship's air recycling infrastructure, visible from orbit, measurable in atmospheric data, progressing in real time. The genetic diversity problem. The Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IBES, reported in 2019 that approximately 1 million species are currently facing extinction due to human activity. 1 million. The genetic diversity of Earth's biosphere is not ornamental. It is the planet's long-term resilience archive, the accumulated biological solutions to every environmental challenge life has faced across 4 billion years of evolution. Losing species is not losing color from a painting. It is deleting code from the system's backup drive, one file at a time, without checking whether any of those files are load-bearing. The governance problem. Climate change requires coordinated action from approximately 200 sovereign nations, each with their own political pressures, economic incentives, and timeframes for democratic accountability. The mission drift that threatens a generation ship over 3 centuries is playing out across Earth's civilization. In real time, every international agreement slightly weaker than the problem requires, every political cycle shorter than the consequences demand, every generation of leadership managing for the next election, while the systems that actually matter operate on timescales of decades and centuries. The ship is drifting. The instruments show it. The councils keep meeting. The knowledge problem. UNESCO estimates that one language disappears from the world every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks. A unique cognitive framework, a distinct way of encoding experience, organizing knowledge. Describing the natural world vanishes permanently. Indigenous languages, in particular, carry embedded ecological knowledge accumulated across centuries of direct observation, which plants signal underground water, which animal behaviors predict weather, which seasonal patterns indicate ecosystem stress. That knowledge does not transfer automatically into the dominant language when the speakers of the original language are gone. It goes with them. The library loses volumes. Nobody catalogs the loss. The only difference between Earth and the hypothetical generation ship we have been examining across 15 sections of this essay is this: we are already here. We know the ship is running. We can see the life support systems, measure their performance, observe their degradation in real time with instruments of extraordinary precision. The first generation boarding a generation ship would use every tool available to them to ensure the ecosystem functioned, because they would know, with complete clarity, that no alternative existed. They would not debate whether the CO2 scrubbers mattered. They would not argue about whether the water recycling system was worth the investment. They would not treat the reactor maintenance schedule as a political question subject to the preferences of whoever currently held power. They would maintain the systems because the alternative was dying, and the alternative was obvious. On Earth, we have the same situation and lack only the same sense of its reality. When we study how to build a generation ship, when we work through every problem in this essay, every systems failure, every governance crisis, every psychological collapse, every genetic bottleneck, we are not actually studying the future. We are studying ourselves, reflected in a mirror angled to show what we cannot quite see when we look straight ahead. The question is not whether humanity can build a generation ship. The question is whether we can learn fast enough from the exercise of imagining one to apply what we learn here, right now, before it is too late. Step back from all of it. The fuel equations, the reactor failures, the genetic bottlenecks, the governance paradoxes, the psychological erosion. Step back from the 40,000 passengers and the 300 years and the pale dot of a destination star that may or may not hold a civilization when it finally arrives. The remarkable thing is not whether humanity can build a perfect generation ship. We almost certainly cannot, not yet. The remarkable thing is that we are seriously working through the problem anyway, that engineers and biologists and political philosophers are sitting down together right now, solving problems for a mission none of them will ever board, toward a destination none of them will ever see. That is not delusion. That is something closer to the deepest expression of what this species actually is. We don't know if a generation ship can survive 300 years. No one does. We have never tried. Every answer offered across these 15 sections is a best current estimate, built on incomplete data, subject to revision the moment reality disagrees. The question remains open. It has always been open. And an open question is not a failed one, it is an invitation, still waiting, still belonging to whoever is strange enough and brave enough to walk toward it. Humans are the only species in the known universe that looks at a point of light 4.24 light years away and asks, what would it take not as poetry? As an engineering problem worth spending a life on. Every other creature on this planet is oriented toward the world immediately around it. We are the ones who look further. Every time you find a star in a clear night sky, you are looking at a question with no answer yet. And somehow, knowing that, you still find it beautiful. Maybe the generation ship was never really a question about the future. Maybe it is a mirror showing us what we are, what we have built, what we are risking, and what we might still become. The reflection is not a spacecraft heading toward Proxima Centauri. It is this planet, right now. And the question looking back at you is simple. What do you see?